Oops. What? Oh, by God. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to cut the music. Just trying to get everything together. Just have to bring in Facebook and we can get started. Word. Sorry for the dead air. Should be coming. All is well. Yeah, thank you. I just did. We're all set up. My son, I'm sorry I was a couple of minutes late. My son had stole my mic cord and didn't replace it. He just brought it in here and sat it down, but didn't hook it back up. So I had to scramble to find the mic. And then I put it away somewhere else because I didn't know he had taken my mic cord, even though he came to me and told me that he was taking the mic cord and that anyway, my domestic squabbles. That accounts for my delays. I like to be on time. My stuff. Anyway, I'm here now. Of course, can we lower the volume? All right. Of course, this is BroDiallo. Every Wednesday we do a Q&A session for questions, comments, and criticisms about various topics. I was trying to line up a guest for this evening's Q&A, but it didn't work. Didn't get a message back. But I will continue to try to get this scholar on because I think the brother got some good insights for the Q&A. So I will work on that in the future. But even if I don't have a guest, then it's just you and I, and we'll chop it up about topics you guys are interested in and you guys want to share. So this is Q&A with BroDiallo. If you saw my Monday radio broadcast from Q4 Radio, if you listened to or saw it on YouTube or Facebook, or you listened to it at the Q4 radio station radio site, then you'll know the topic was another installment of the genocide cycle. So I would like to prioritize questions related to genocide and oppression. But that's not... I thought I made it public. Why is it showing private? Sorry. So I will prioritize questions related to that issue. If there are no questions related to that issue, I will take on any and all topics, discussions, comments, and criticisms. And if I don't have the answer, I'm more than happy to acknowledge that I don't have an answer, that I'm at a loss, and we could either suss it out together using the internet, or we can come back to it later, or if you stump me, you stump me, and then you'll just have to seek it out somewhere else. So that's it. You told me, is it Shamaya? You told me how to pronounce your name last time. Yes, and I don't mean to butcher your names. I got mad respect, mad love to all of my viewers, regardless of if they align with me ideologically or not. So if I do butcher your name, it's accidental. And maybe you can shoot me the phonetic spelling of your name if correct pronunciation is a a must. So I definitely appreciate that. Is that Obit? Is that old school Obit? I had an Obit on my page. We used to go back and forth back in the day, and I found myself missing him. So if that is the Obit from back in the day, in the comments, then I definitely conjured you up through sending out vibrations through the universe. So that's interesting. Good evening, Wagwan. Let me just confirm one more time. So if you have any questions, comments, or criticisms or topics, now would be the time. Because if I start rambling, I might not be able to stop myself. Lord have mercy. Is Facebook private? I changed it to public. Okay, yeah, it's up. They love trying to suppress me. So, oh, it's a new Obit. Okay, then I didn't conjure you up. Damn it. I was been waiting for confirmation of the supernatural for years. All my life I've had to fight. All my life I've been waiting for confirmation of the supernatural, and it is yet to get one. I've been in a back and forth with what's up, Mark? I've been in a back and forth with Christians, and I had a white evangelical Christian use that old fallacious assertion that everything around us is evidence of God. Everything around us is evidence of God's glory and God's greatness and creation itself. Everything around us. And if God is evident, that's not how evidence works. You go try to get a home loan or buy a car, and they were like, what's your credit score? And I'm like, everything around us is evidence that I am a man of good standing, and I am a man who pays his debts. That explanation don't work. That explanation is only used when you don't have explanation. Evidence, that explanation is only used if you don't have any answers. Like, if your woman come to you and be like, do you love me? And like, yeah, how do I know you love me? Everything around us is evidence. I'm standing here. Or baby, you like the meal? You see me eating the meal? That's the weakest evidence. And I would think for the almighty creator of everything that is imbues everything with purpose and power, we'd be able to find more substantial evidence for his existence than, look around you. But anyway, I was going back and forth with these Christians, black Christians, and some white evangelicals jumped in the mix, and he started throwing that. And normally I don't talk to white Christians. I don't debate much with white folks unless they pay me, But I don't debate much with white folks about anything, especially on social media where it ain't formal. And but this I just decided to engage him because I was talking to some black folks about God in existence, because this guy made some asinine statement about God is working and God is doing things and God is working in the background and God's in control of everything. And I said, no, he's not, And they started talking that, he might not come when you want him, but he's always right on time. And I really didn't think anybody under the age of 65 would ever recite that. But anyway, so when the evangelical jumped on it and said that, I just actually started, because I don't get to talk to white folks. I don't make enough money and I don't have enough credentials to move into a nice white neighborhood. So I don't get to talk to white folks that often. Not that I lamented, but it was an opportunity. So I took it, and it was a weird back and forth. But one thing I learned is that white evangelicals are just as absurd in their beliefs as black Christians. But it's still more tragic for black Christians because at least they're being absurd in their own mythology. They're being absurd in their own delusions, as opposed to being absurd in alien delusions. So I will definitely respect a Kimite or Egyptian tree of life practitioner, or a practitioner of Ifa or Yoruba, the Akan, or worshiper of Okulonkugu. I would respect the delusions and mythologies and folklore of a believer who's coming from an African spiritualist tradition than an alien spiritualist tradition. So anyway, but there's no reason to believe that white Christians have some more logic to their beliefs than black Christians. Anyway, finally got a question. I told y'all delay shooting me these questions, comments, and or criticisms. I start rambling on Q&A night. So what is that Chili Film Media? Don't y'all know? Where's the spacing and capitalization? But I guess that's all word. Chili Film Media, welcome back. I do recognize this person. Do you know anything about the Republic of New Africa ideology? Any thoughts about it? What I do know, there's a lot there, but what I do know that makes them stand out is that the Republic of New Africa is petitioning, campaigning, working, organizing towards, and even are willing to take up arms and engage in militant struggle so that African people can receive some designated land within the United States for sovereign African territory for us to live on and govern as we see fit. And that's what I understand about it. And they want, ironically or non-ironically, they're campaigning or organizing to receive the traditional African states or old school African states. Let's see if I can bring this up. Hold on. Let me screen share this. So the New African Republic, they want Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and what's this? The Carolinas. They want to take these territories and make them independent an independent African republic. And a republic is a land that is governed by laws as opposed to a monarchy or something. So they have some progressive views on how they intend to govern the land, but they have several pamphlets that they've published for this land. But really what they are, oh wait, crap. Sorry. Really what they are seeking to do is settler colonialism. They want black people who are there to take over governance, and they want black people who are outside of that territory to be given the options of surrendering their U.S. citizenship, moving to the New African Republic, which are those 5 southern states. And now some of the New African Republic also want Florida. Wow. And they want the right. Either the white people in those territories will have to be willing to live under African governance, or they will have to exit the New African Republic. And some of the more militants say that the whites will have to be expelled. They won't have an option of remaining there, even if they pledge their loyalty and oath to the New African Republic. I have a lot of issues with this. First of all, no sovereign nation will surrender territory without war. So unless they're organizing to fight a protracted guerrilla warfare campaign and force the United States through warfare, through ongoing combat to the negotiation table, that's not going to happen. It's never going to be legislated that they will surrender their territory. No nation will do that, mainly because it sets a bad precedent. That if they're able to do that, then you have the Texas sovereignty movement. There's a whole bunch of white folks in Texas that want to annex Texas. There's a whole bunch of white folks in Alaska that want to annex Alaska. There's a whole bunch of people who I think the Texas annexation and Alaska annexation people are crazy. But the Hawaiian people want their land back. And so they want to take over governance and even maybe reinstitute the monarch of Hawaii, and they want their lands back. So, and not to mention the Native Americans. So there are so many people who have legitimate and illegitimate claims to lands and territories within the defined borders of the United States, that the United States, if they were to make concessions with any group, it would start a cascade and be highly disruptive. So and I think the amount of energy, of resources, of blood that's necessary to spill in order to achieve that goal really wouldn't be worth the outcome. Because even if you set up that territory, you're still surrounded by the majority of the United States. and you would still have to negotiate with the United States through for egress, water, and for access to the territorial waters. It's a it's a it's an unrealistic dream unless part of their thing is to completely collapse the U.S. federal government. If the U.S. federal government did collapse, like what happened with the Soviet Union, and so all of the territories under the Soviet Union were started scrambling to establish themselves independently. Remember, Yugoslavia was broken into like 5 or 6 different countries. And so with the collapse of the Iron Curtain or the Soviet Union, several of the what they call the Balkan states, and it's even a word called balkanization, where formerly nations or territories that were united by a superpower, and that superpower collapses economically or loses a major military victory, and then all of its um, surrounding, all of its client states or subject states will break up. It would take something like the erosion of the U.S. federal government. And then with that, with balkanization, more likely than not, the territories that become black territories will be pretty much anywhere where you have masses of black people already living. The major black cities, Chicago, so like Northeast Illinois could become a black territory. Maybe Georgia. Ain't enough colored folks around to take over 4 connected states like that. So it's not really realistic. I used to read their literature back in the day, but I think that there are more viable solutions for black liberation and black empowerment, mainly Pan-Africanism, where black people, the African diaspora, becomes a recognized political force within the African governance. And we form a diasporan union and join the African Union and go back to Africa, as opposed to trying to piggyback on white folks' colonization of this land and become a neo-colonizers in taking this land, or further, removing this land from the ownership or the governance of the Native American population. So I don't think it's realistic. I don't think that even if it was achieved, it would simply open a can of worms to several other problems. And the problem is, ain't no such things as halfway revolutions, halfway crooks. There's really no solution as far as the New African Republic, that they have to make core central to their agenda the collapse or total subversion of the U.S. government. But really, they're expecting that the U.S. federal government would be intact to legitimize their claim on the land. So the very thing that they have to do is the very thing that they are not willing to do. It don't make sense. But if you're a black person and you want a vision, and a lot of black folks don't want to win. Dr. Claude Anderson said a lot of times when it relates to black liberation and black empowerment, we play to play. We don't play to win. We like to do things that make us feel like we're doing something, but we don't want to go so far as that it could disrupt our life. So I want to be able to work and live and enjoy the spoils of living in America. At the same time, I could live a lifetime as a revolutionary fighting against America. So we want to fight for things that will leave the overall structure intact. So I think it's a fever dream, or a pipe dream. And I have some new African people, Republican people, it's a lot of them out there. They might be mad at me, and I might be wrong. Because if they succeed, I know I'm going to pack up and pack my bags and put on my moving hat like the Great Migration. And I'm going to be singing along the road. And I'd head down there too. I'd get, if it was some land government. But, and then they could tell me, you see, you was talking all that ish. And I'm like, I was wrong. But I ain't wrong so far. It doesn't seem realistic. And I think one of the main reasons it's not realistic is because there are, at least just off the top of my head, a dozen groups of white people who all have claims to certain territories and want to annex from this land. And look at the last time a population of white folks said, we want to take certain territories, and they didn't want to establish a republic. They wanted to establish a confederacy. And these was white folks. And the bloodiest war, per capita war, the deadliest per capita war the United States has ever had was the Civil War. And if they would do that to white folks and white people who wanted to establish white domination, If they would blow up some white folks, shoot white folks with cannons for saying we want to separate, what the hell you think they're going to do to black folks? So if you're going to be a member of the new African Republic, you better be super militant and prepare for war. You better establish a militias. You better get arms. You better train in the ways of asymmetric warfare and mass weapons, and make some overseas allies with some for arms shipments, because that's a fight. That ain't nothing you can protest for, campaign for. That's something you have to fight, a bloody, protracted war. When I say a protracted war, you can't win. You got to win an ongoing battle. Anyway, you know, the Palestinians been fighting the last more than a half century for the land that they already owned. They ain't fighting for somebody to give some of their land. They fighting for their own land, and white folks is killing them for asking for their own land back. So what you think white folks gonna do if you ask for some of their land? Just unrealistic. I'm really surprised it's as popular as the new African Republic is as popular as it is. Hello, Valencia. Shy Life Media. Okay, appreciate you, Shy Life Media. What did I call you? Chili Fee Media. So that happened, but I appreciate the proper. Hey, I manifesto. Amani Festo. That's clever as hell. Greetings. Imani Festo states we want to reap the benefits of the spoils of empire. We absolutely do. We have grown accustomed. We want to go to war with a Gucci belt. We want to stick our Glocks in a Gucci belt. We want monogram red bottom combat boots. We want a comfortable, high fashion, litty revolution. I guess. Okay, Andy. Good evening. Hey, Diallo. Why, when a certain segment of the right do talk about reparations for black folks, they strictly focus on black American folks, as if the U.S. global interest doesn't affect Haiti, global South? Do you mean the right? When you talk about the right wing, are you talking about white conservatives or black conservatives? Because the reason is because the right blacks, the reason why black people who support reparations only talk about black Americans is because they are integrationists. They don't want reparations in order to liberate us and empower us. They want reparations so that we can pay the monetary cost of full integration with whites. They want to take their reparations money and pay tuition to white institutions. They want to take their reparations money and pay for access to white communities and to buy property and to rent property into white communities. They want to take reparations money and pay wedding planners so that they can marry white folks and white spouses. They want to use that money to pay white folks for access to them, to white folks. That's why black people do it. The reason why white conservatives talk only about black Americans is because they understand that if they give money outside of the United States, if they give Haiti reparations, Haiti is going to use those resources to build up a sovereign, independent nation that could someday be in opposition. Same thing with the many African nations and other Caribbean and Latin American nations that suffer from U.S. imperialism. If they give reparations to non-integrationists, because the United States spends billions of dollars funding African dictators, African warlords, African sellouts, coons, and traitors. They have no problem printing and doling out fiat currency to black traders. But when you deal with reparations, then to give reparations to anything other than conservatives, sellouts, or integrationists would be basically white folks funding their own demise. I don't know why I'm talking like this. You know, maybe I'm just trying to keep myself emotionally stable, because when I start talking about these ADOS, FBA people, I start to cussing. And I do have some elders that like to watch the BroDiallo broadcasts, various broadcasts, and I don't want to always offend them. It's hard not to offend them because, you know, they don't like when I talk about Jesus, and they don't like when I cuss. So at least I like to try to keep as much as the BroDiallo broadcast PG as possible. Moving on. Because it's interested to keep us ignorant and disconnected from Africa. Yes, that's okay. You answering questions too in the comments. All right, it's the Manifest show too. Big homie James. All right, James. Okay, he asked today is the birthday of El Hajj Malik Shabazz, aka Malcolm X. Today is also the birthday of Dale Jones, aka Nana Kuntu, aka the war correspondent. Today is also his birthday. Today is also the birthday of Ho Chi Minh, one of the greatest guerrilla tacticians and guerrilla warriors the world has ever seen, from leader of the Viet Cong or the Vietnamese Communist Party. It is also his birthday. Today is also the day of transition, or the day that we lost Sam Greenlee, the another militant revolutionary author who wrote the book The Spook Who Sat by the Door, who also produced and wrote the script and co-directed the movie The Spook Who Sat by the Door. So I mean, something about this is a magical day. 519, man. But it's Malcolm X Day and Dale Jones Day. So anyway, James asked the ballot or the bullet. I say the ballot and the bullet. I don't know when it. Malcolm X, the same man who gave the speech, the ballot or the bullet. Really, his conclusion, if you listen to the details of the speech, he says the ballot and the bullet. He says that you're gonna, if you vote and you succeed in getting what you want from the vote, then fine. He said if you vote and you don't receive what you want from the vote, then it's time for revolution. But the only way to convince most Negroes that the system ain't for us is they're going to have to go through it. They're going to have to see for themselves. You know, some people don't believe fat meat's greasy, so you're going to have to put them in the kettle and watch and show them that the fat meat's greasy. So I think that we can use the village, use the ballot box, and I got some mantras. I don't even like talking about this stuff outside of November, outside of election season, because it's so exhausting. But Black people, when it comes to election, we should be cold, distant, and calculating. That means when we vote, we don't get caught up in the hype or the celebrity or the symbolism of some monumental Negro first Black president, first female woman of color that's a vice president, all of that. We should be cold. We don't give a damn who's running. We should be distant. We don't put all our hopes in voting, and we should be calculating, meaning we're going to vote for who best serves our long-term and short-term interests, regardless of all that other shit. Cold, distant, and calculated. And we should vote for harm reduction, meaning that if we could vote for a politician or a policy that reduces the harm to our community, other vulnerable populations, or the ecosystems, that's where our votes should go. We should vote for resource extraction, meaning if one politician is like, hey, I'm going to give the welfare, I'm going to give the housing vouchers, I'm going to relieve, give free health care, I'm going to give, then they get our vote. So it's about resource extraction and harm reduction. Those are the two main things we vote for. We don't vote for liberation. We don't vote for freedom. We don't even vote for justice. Those are things we get in the streets. So it's that simple. So I say that's what we do with the ballot. As far as the bullet, we need to stop parading with guns and flashing guns and developing this and mimicking white gun culture, aka amosexuality. We have to be as strategic. If there is any armed conflict of Black people in the United States, based on our state as a subject citizen, second-class citizens, as an oppressed population, the only way we can effectively engage in any level of violence against state, representative of the states, or multinational corporation is through asymmetrical guerrilla warfare. And two things that asymmetrical guerrilla warriors never do is reveal themselves or reveal their weapons. The white majority should not know what type of weapons we have and who has them. They shouldn't know who's willing to fight or who's willing to submit. There should be some few people, revolutionary scholars, revolutionary advocates, that will expose themselves and say, hey, this is what we advocate for. But the rank and file fighters, family men, don't get out there and show your gun, because somebody wants to break in your house and you think making a post on Instagram with your AK-47 is going to discourage them. That's just going to make them plan better. I prefer someone be like, I don't know what that fool got up in there, and I don't know where he keep it. You know, the art of you surrender the element of surprise. So I think that if you're serious, any black person that thinks they're serious about going to the bullet route, whether that is to say, hey, I'm going to just defend my community, or hey, I'm going to rise up for revolution, no matter what your purpose is of having a gun as a black man within the confines of the United States, if you're going to effectively use that weapon for anything other than protecting your trinkets and maintaining the status quo, if you're going to use that weapon for anything radical or revolutionary, the last fucking thing you need to do is be flashing that motherfucker in pictures on social media or talking about what you're going to do with a gun. And if you go into the range, put that shit in a sealed lock box, lock it away, and don't take it out till you get to the range. And never take all your shit on the same day. You better be a guerrilla. Don't show yourself. Don't show your weapon. I mean, we just talking about Sam Greenlee died on this day in 2006. We lost a great strategic thinker. And the one thing a violent revolutionary, a violent guerrilla wants to do is appear as passive and non-harmful to the enemy as possible. So I think in 2021, that strategy was different. We'll look at in the 1920s with Garvey and his African legions marching in the street. We'll look at the Deacons for Defense or the Black Panther Party and say they stood in guns in the street. And instead of thinking and saying, okay, how has the movement evolved? How have our objectives evolved? How have our vulnerabilities and our assets evolved from 50 years ago, from 100 fucking years ago? If you're doing the same thing now that they did, that the Panthers did, you are in a state of what is called stagnation or regression. And we literally got people, I'm in the Huey P. Newton gun club. I'm just not with that shit. I don't see the benefit. And my best example to say I think that I'm right is that the Not Fucking Around Coalition, there were over 180 incidents of racist people using weapons and vehicles to attack and harass and intimidate Black Lives Matter protests through the George Floyd protests, between the Michael Brown protest and the George Floyd protest. There are almost 200 serious incidents of Black people being killed or injured while in the streets. And not one of those instances was one of these armed, not fucking around Black militia, Huey P. Newton gun club people there to defend us. The Not Fucking Around Coalition have only discharged and shot people 3 different times. And not one of those 3 different people who were shot by the Not Fucking Around Coalition were white nationalists, neo-Nazis, not even Black conservatives. The 3 people who were shot were members of the group through accidental discharge of the weapon. So I say the ballot done properly and the bullet done properly. I say neither the ballot or the bullet if you voting for your dreams and hashtag goes the Obama, or if you just flashing your weapon, creating more disruption, more chaos than you are order and support and safety. That's my position. All right, the follow-up question. Got to take mine. James been a supporter since day one, so I got to take his questions. So to the end, the end of all this civic engagement, or Armageddon. I don't really understand the question, but the end of the civic engagement is harm reduction and resource extraction. And no matter what stage you are in the revolutionary struggle, whether you're in the advocacy and building stage, whether you're in the warfare stage, or you're in the stage where you're trying to negotiate or sue for peace, whatever stage you are in the revolutionary struggle, you should always be engaged in harm reduction and resource extraction. So that's civic engagement and governance. You know, if you could go and there's a local election and there's a politician that wants to give funding to the schools and keep the schools under the control of the community through elections, through parent boards, through elected school representatives, and there's another guy, a politician, that says, hey, I'm going to privatize the schools and give it over to the charter parasites. Why? Voting for one or the other does not in any way disrupt your revolutionary agenda. So you can vote for anything that does not detract from or subvert your agenda. And 99.9% of the shit on ballots has nothing to do with Black liberation or Black oppression. It's basic governance, like the flat tax, versus the progressive tax. We should be organizing and rebelling, whether it was flat tax or progressive tax. But if I'm going to fight for revolution, I'd rather fight for revolution where the government is imposing carbon reduction in carbon emissions. I'd rather fight for revolution where adequate resources are coming to the public school system in my community. That don't say, well, if that's something, and there's another myth that Black people have that thinks that suffering, individual suffering, will drive people to collective rebellion. So if conservative politicians gets in, if Trump gets a second term, and Black people will be so downtrodden, so beat down, that they'll rise up for revolution. That hasn't been supported by history. History actually demonstrates people are more prone to rebel when they see there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Optimistic people are more likely to engage in rebellion and liberation struggle than pessimistic people. So we don't have to think, well, if this politician passes out some more food vouchers or gives, impoverished mothers housing vouchers and WIC, or if they reform WIC and allow mothers on WIC to buy organic food from the farmer's market, you'd be like, well, I'd rather her have to feed her children Snickers because that'll make her a revolutionary. That's not how that works. So revolutionaries should be fighting to bring relief to the people at any stage of the struggle. Even Che Guevara, when he was literally in the trenches fighting the CIA, fighting against armed kill squads throughout Bolivia and other parts of Latin America, when he'd come across peasants, he'd give them some supplies. He'd still try to give whatever relief he could to the peasants, even though they weren't directly engaged in the struggle. So we should always be working, whether it's through grassroots organization or even voting for certain, political platforms, to bring relief as we continue to organize for overthrow of the system. So I don't say end the civic engagement. I say be more strategic and mindful in it. I don't think, we should be fighting to end Armageddon, because Armageddon is really the destruction of the ecosystem by industrial capitalism. So yes, we should be working to end that as well. Hey Diallo, have you ever watched or heard of Godfather of Harlem? It's about Bumpy Johnson, Adam Clayton, and Malcolm X. You should do Black media reviews from a radical standpoint. Just an idea. I appreciate that input. And I will. I just finished doing a book review for Black on Black Violence, and I'm currently working on a book review for this book. The Light. Who Stole the Soul? The Weaponization of Hip Hop, a Historical and Psychological Perspective. So I do monthly book reviews. So next month, this will be the book I'll be reviewing. I just finished a detailed review that will be out this week of this book. So yeah, I'll be interested if I get the proper support, man. I just do what people support me doing. Like I said, none of this shit that I'm doing sitting here in front of this camera is not a vanity project. So if I think it's making an impact and people are willing to support and give inputs, I will continue to expand the BroDiallo media apparatus and the overall revolutionary media apparatus. So yeah, I will do that, but I have to see that there's ongoing and adequate support for these efforts. So I appreciate the input. I like movies, I like media, all forms of media. Hell, and so I would love to do that, and I'm willing to look into doing that. But I'm going to need the BroDiallo community to continue to expand and support and kick a brother down, winning if you can. Okay, moving on. Media reviews and book reviews. Let's support. Yes, appreciate that. Kadir says, yeah, I'd say there's a third B, which is bread or beans. Haha. I don't know what the first two B's are. But anyway, yeah. But it kind of frustrates me a lot of these super blacks, these alpha Afrocentrics. They tend to think that they tend to try to advocate for things that will increase the suffering of the people, so that the people will be, number one, they'll be hardened, and number two, that hardness will somehow make them resentful of the government, and then that resentful will lead to them organizing to overthrow or attack the government. But you'll find that most black revolutions don't work that way. Now, European revolutions, Europeans have a different personality. They have a different culture. They have a different methodology. They have a different mentality. Black people, you will get them to rise up and rebel by demonstrating love and optimism. Whereas Europeans, let them eat cake. Suffering might drive them to do shit, but that's just isn't what I see. I'm not saying that black people have to be in utopia or pleasure to rise up, but black people, the suffering can't be the main goal. The suffering can be a component. The suffering could be, hey, the injustices and suffering that we endure is an issue, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel, or there's a love. People love you. People acknowledge you. People are willing to put their lives down for you and unite with you to change this. So even if it's horrendous conditions that you're fighting against, you're going to have to explain to them that it's the positive aspect or the uplifting aspects that's going to motivate them. Just from my own experience and optimism. So these alpha blacks that love to talk about, yeah, don't vote, no, don't get welfare, just suffer, struggle until we free. Even and many of the black folks who advocate that are sitting in the lap of luxury. Like Dr. Umar tell black folks don't vote, meaning he doesn't want black folks to contribute to or try to influence policies. But you saw when a bunch of people reported him to the Philadelphia Psychological Association, he was about to lose his license. I thought, Umar, to protect his brand, will come and be like, I don't care about license. I don't need the white man validation. This dude lost his shit. Now, this is a couple of years ago, so a lot of people forgot, but he went groveling to the board. He had his manila folders, his accordion files, and went there and told Massa, hey, I've been good. I haven't violated your policies. I've been good. I've lived up to everything, and please don't kick me out. Please don't take away my title and legitimacy. But while he's telling black folks, forget the system, when the system was like, how about we forget you, Dr. Umar? Dr. Umar was like, please give me key. I need that title of doctor and all the license and benefits that come with it. So a lot of these people who tell black people grind and suffer are doing that from a position of great comfort. For years, Farrakhan was telling black folks, don't vote, until he endorsed Obama. So he had over 60 years of telling black folks, don't vote. Which means, and black people, I live in Chicago, are fucked over by the political system. And black people have so much opportunity. There's elections where less than 12% of where black people could, like the taxes and getting rid of immunity for cops. There's so many things black people could do that aren't revolutionary, but will provide many of us, if not most of us, with some level of relief to help us better navigate this society and this system. And black people just wash their hands of it. And Farrakhan's telling black people, don't vote for benefits, don't vote for welfare, don't vote for some relief, while he's sitting in a mansion. Of course, Farrakhan, the regressive policies like the flat tax benefit him because he's part of the 1%. He's a multimillionaire. So of course, he might be down, at the same time he wants to kill the devil. He's sipping wine and sitting in these elite spaces next to the devil. But I digress. Okay, Obed. What do you think about the United States pushing Haitian President Puppet to change Haitian constitution? There's so much to say about Haiti. Of course I'm against it. And he wants to change a little background. Moist. President Moise wants to change the constitution so that he can extend his time in office. It's pretty much petty dictator shit. And Jovenel Moise, he wants to and he's been re-sworn in as president. He got sworn in last month. But he basically wants to be leader for life, just like Baby Doc, Papa Doc. And I'm against it. The United States really is indifferent. I don't think the United States are like, if you want to run, you're a good boy. You do everything we tell you to do. But, we could replace you. So really, this is a fight he had to do on his own. He almost lost it. But the United States, these puppets are interchangeable. That's why I don't know why people sell out. It's like, if you know anything about the history of being an Uncle Tom sellout, being a puppet leader for the United States, they stab you in the back as soon as they done with you. But yeah, I'm against it. I think he needs to be kicked out of power. But it's also funny that black people can look at what's happening in Haiti and be like, that ain't right. He should run. He shouldn't be able to change the Constitution to give himself additional terms. But then again, black people are like, I support Farrakhan. I support Jesse. I support Al Sharpton. These black leaders, ineffective, incompetent, unskilled, untested, uncriticizable black leaders have been in power. You look at the top organizations, the only black organizations that have regular turnover of power are black organizations that are fully funded and directly controlled by white folks, like the HBCUs. They have regular turnover in leadership. The NAACP, the Urban League, the Negro College Fund, the ones that white folks manage, a Negro will be like, well, my time's up. Good day, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. But when it's a more or semi-independent black group like the Nation of Islam, leader for life. Even the National Black United Front, organization that I was a member of, they had the same leader from the 70s up to the 2000s, Conrad Worrell. He retired, but he only retired because his health was stepped down as chairman of the National Black United Front. And I even, in the charter of the National Black United Front, it said that there was supposed to be reoccurring elections. I think 4 or 6 years. It's been a while since I read it, but he was a leader for life. So even the quote unquote progressive black movements have leader for life. So we'll look at Haiti, or we'll look in Africa and see these leaders who refuse to step down. So many African countries are having that issue right now. But we look at the black organizations, which are our governing bodies. They are our Congress. They are our Senate. They direct and set policies and priorities for our communities. And these black organizations have leaders for life, and we got these leaders for life, and we don't blink. So I think it's wrong for Haiti, and I think it's wrong for the African diaspora as a whole, whether it is a government or a governing body or a black not-for-profit or a black organization. We need to methods for critiquing and removing leadership that is proven to be incompetent. We also need, just for the sake of it, we need fresh blood. I mean, this shit is crazy. Even under oppressive communism, the Duma, which is the Congress for under Soviet Union, they had a higher turnover rate than the U.S. Congress and most black organizations. So these oppressive organizations that we say are dictatorships often have higher turnover rates than liberated democratic African countries and Caribbean and Central and Latin American countries. It's crazy. Okay. Are you speaking on Umar? Yeah, he would have gotten way further and solidified if he whined about his certification. Umar's never going to give up his white man papers. And I don't care if that paper is fiat currency or his degrees in certification and license. And it's crazy, the contradiction. But I mean, a lot of these hyper militant black leaders got such little regard for their own followers that they don't even fear contradicting themselves. Umar will say, don't vote, don't ask the white man for nothing. And then the white man said, we're going to take away your license to practice child psychology. And he ran crying. He went crying to the board. And I don't know what he said because it was a closed hearing, but whatever he told them white men, they were like, fine, good. They gave him a pat on his head and let him keep his papers. And remember, he said, y'all, he was ready to move to Africa. If they took away his credentials, he was going to move to Africa. But Africa is worthy of his presence if he don't have credentials. But after they allowed him to keep his credentials, all that talk of moving to Africa ended that day. But like I said, what I do? Marlena showing up on CP time. Welcome, sis. Mark Diallo, just trying to understand this racist system. Is it the governments that do the bidding of the corporations, or do they work together? It really depends. It depends. It's what they call a symbiotic relationship, which means there's really no dominant force. It's the one feeds off the other. So there are areas and arenas where the government is powerful and asserts its power. And there are governments and arenas where the corporations assert their power. But there has been the trend since the Reagan Revolution, since the Reagan deregulation movement, that corporations have surpassed the state in power. But that's a relatively new phenomenon. But we also see with a lot of kickbacks, with the Republicans threatening to regulate social media companies, and the Democrats threatening to increase taxes on corporations and close tax loopholes, and to also reinstitute many of the regulations that from Reagan to Trump have been done. So the government is starting to read. So it's always been this tension and this tug of war, but generally 99.9% of the time they align and they have a symbiotic relationship. And there's also a what they call a revolving door. Many of the high level bureaucrats, the appointed bureaucrats, will come from the very companies they regulate. So, the FDA chair will be somebody from Kraft, or the national security secretary always comes from the defense industry. And then when the national security chair leaves the defense industry, they'll go sit on the board of Raytheon or Boeing or some other. So it's a revolving door, but there is a tug of war. Sometimes they do diverge and they do conflict, but generally they have the same objective: to sustain the status quo of capitalism and white domination. They just sometimes have major and sometimes minor differences on how to best go about that. So it's a symbiotic relationship, not a dominance one. But so for various reasons, the media will try to play like the government is regulating corporations to death. And then other times the corporate media will pretend like the corporations are this looming force that we need the government to protect us from. So they play that off of each other. But really, they're so intertwined, we can't really separate them. When you're resisting corporations, you are resisting the government. And when you're resisting the government, you're resisting corporations. And sometimes when you're protesting the government, the corporations will pretend to be your friends. So we're fighting against the police, who are government bureaucrats. And then, Pepsi will have a Black Lives Matter commercial. And at the same time, or Nike will give, what's that Afro boy, Kaepernick, a commercial. But at the same time, they're saying Nike will come out with a Black Lives Matter advertisement campaign and a Black Lives Matter t-shirt and a Black Lives Matter leader like Kaepernick will be their mascot. They'll be manufacturing tactical boots. Nike makes police boots. So you could be at a Nike sponsored Black Lives Matter event getting stomped out by some Nike boots that the Nike corporation sold to the police at a great discount. So while you're out there buying your son the $120 Jordans, Nike is selling tactical boots. Nike manufactured tactical boots to the police for $12. And your money that you're paying for the Jordans are supplementing and allowing the police to get them at a cheaper. So these are the boots. I'm sure if you've ever been to a protest, you've seen these boots. I'm just showing them. I'm not playing. I go to Nike's website. Here, peep this. It's taking a little second to load, but so this is the corporation. Like, corporation makes the boots, and then the government stomps you on the neck with the boots. I don't know why it's not loading. Here it is. I'm sure if you've been to a protest, you've seen these goddamn boots. You've seen these motherfuckers, and they retail for $185. But if you're a government employee, if you're a cop using those boots to stomp the necks of black protesters, look at this, nice, god damn. If you're using these boots, then you get to write them off as an expense. So these are the Nike tactical boots. They have some other ones, and they come in various colors and camouflage. So that's private-public partnership. So but then sometimes, let's say we're protesting Nike, and Nike has sweatshops in Haiti, and it's exploiting Haitian labor and polluting the Haitian ecosystem. And then the government, and while we're fighting against Nike, the government will come in and say, we're going to call the Nike CEO. We're going to make him come and bring him before Congress, put him on the hot seat. And we're going to have congressional hearings about Nike's. So, they pretend to be on our side when we're fighting one against the other. It's a really good hustle. It's a good fucking hustle. I wish we were as strategic. So, the corporations do the bidding of the government, and the government often forces corporations to bow to their, like when Trump was fighting his trade war. Many corporations had to renegotiate their contracts or downplay their connections to the communist government in China. And while the United States is going to war with Iraq, Hollywood, private corporations, and media corporations will start making movies to promote the military, to get people to join the military. It's a symbiotic, or even, I don't want a symbiotic, that's too clean of a word. It's an incestuous relationship between government and corporations. They are allies, more so, and they are two power elements, segments of power, you know. And so you can't ever be in a position where you're just like, let's go against the corporations because they run everything, or let's go against the government. You have to do a two-pronged attack. You have to be anti-capitalist. And the government, you can't have capitalism without fascism. And fascism is a merger or a coordination between corporate private power and public state power. So, Tay-C, I hear people say that Obama or any POTUS really hasn't done anything for Black people. Why are things like the Affordable Care Act, Medicaid, HBCU, or Black Biz funding, etc., not true examples of helping us? Yeah, it's not true. I don't like when Black people say there's no difference between the Democrats or the Republicans, or they've never done anything for Black people. Because when you have Black people who are not radical or who are not revolutionary, that rings false. That rings very false, because it is false. What I think you should say, instead of saying there's no difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, or they've never done, you say the government has made concessions to Black people. They have made concessions. And then you're in a position to say, but how do Black people secure those concessions? What did we have to do to get those concessions? So when you talk about the HBCUs, yes, the government gives funding to HBCUs, but what has been the historical role and historical impact of HBCUs? And then you can refer them to E. Franklin Frazier's research of the Black bourgeoisie, or you can talk about the miseducation of the Negro. When you talk about Medicaid, you can talk about the war on poverty. You can talk about it started with Medicaid, started with the New Deal policy reforms. And at the time when the New Deal policy reforms and the Great Society reforms, is basically the bottom line is the government only does good for us, or does anything for us, or makes concessions for us when we are mobilized to sanction the government. So the government has to make a decision. Is it more profitable at this juncture, in this political climate, to give concessions or to continue repression? And when they say Black people are organized, Black people are mobilized, Black people are united and educated, and Black people are becoming more radical, then the government says we have to make concessions. Well, when Black people are trying to integrate, when we are trying to dilute ourselves into the dominant system, when African people are not organized, when we're not being militant, when we don't mobilize and unite across borders and across oceans, then they say we can continue repression. The government is always in a state with Black people of concessions versus repression. And the only thing that determines whether they're going to come with the stick or the hammer is how well organized we are. So you do acknowledge what the government has done or concessions that the government has made for Black people, and then you explain to the Black community why they give those to us. And then you can also explain and say they give us these things, they take it and they give it away. So there was times where Black people had not just Medicaid, HBCUs, but there were remember, this is an old word called affirmative action. Remember that? Remember when we had all these Black congressmen, and you go all the way back to Reconstruction in the late 1800s, the 1870s. And you'll see that Black people have been given concessions and they've been snatched away. There was a time look at prison reform. They came in where you could go, if you went to prison, you could get a PhD. My father learned to become a classical pianist while he was locked up in the penitentiary. My childhood friend's father became a tennis player, learned to play tennis while in the penitentiary for robbing banks. And he got out and became a successful tennis instructor. You could get a PhD, a master's degree. There was all kind of literatures. At this same time, during the prison reform movement of the 70s, they changed even how they called it. They used to call them prisoners or convicts. They started calling them inmates. They used to call them guards, and they started calling them corrections officers. They used to call them prisons, and then they started calling them correctional institutions. They even changed the names and what you could get. And you go talk to some of your old relatives or some OGs in the hood that was locked up in the 70s, and then you go talk to your relatives or the brothers in the streets that have been locked up since the 90s, since the Bill Clinton era. And you'll see all those programs eroded. That's when they started providing vegetarian, organic, halal meals for Muslims to respect people's religious convictions. That's all when that started. But why did they do that? So you can say, yeah, they did that for us. Why did they do that? Because of George Jackson, because of the Attica Rebellion, because prisoners and the community were connected and organized and fighting the systems, and there were prison rebellions and uprisings all over the country. And back in 2015, 2016, 2017, and even during the Obama years, there were hunger strikes and prisons all across the country, and nothing changed because they didn't have the unity in the streets to combine with the unity within the incarcerated population. So they brought repression instead of concessions. So we don't need to deny that the government has done anything for us. But we won like Kwame Ture said, every concession we secured from this government has been a result of us being willing to and spilling our blood. So I don't like when people say nobody ever did for us. There's a whole website dedicated to Obama's policy platform. Sometimes they do things for Black people directly. Other times it's trickle down. But yes, the government has made concessions to Black people, and Black people have secured benefits from the government or resource extraction. But it has always been our level of organization and our level of militancy is directly proportional to the concessions that we can secure. The more we're due for self, I don't give no fucks, I'm gonna get mine, secure the bag. The more that mentality inundates the Black community, the less concessions we get from the government, and the more they start to retract and extract the benefits that they're going to give to us. Okay, let's move on. Do you think Lori Lightfoot is going to be a one-term mayor? It's too early to tell. You won't be able to really accurately predict that. I think she should be. I think she should be a one-term mayor. But it depends on if there can be a charismatic pushback. My problem with Black Chicago politicians is they only do politics when it's time for politics. I worked on a mayoral campaign in the Democratic primary. I supported a progressive politician. And I told the brother, you should have been running for mayor long before the campaign started. You know, it's like right now, midterms election are coming up, and Black people, there'll be Black people that'll pop up out of nowhere. So if I wanted to run against Lori Lightfoot, I would have been campaigning the day she was elected. But in Chicago and many other places, these Black politicians are very short-sighted. And they play the game according to the way the Democratic Party or the DNC, Democratic National Convention. So she should be a one-term mayor. But as I observe the atmosphere right now, because she's a machine politician, if you run against her and lose, you're jeopardizing your entire political career and status. So it's like Black politicians in Chicago are cowards. And if you're not, there's a few who aren't, and those who aren't won't be offended by me saying this because they would support me that. So if you know, hit dogs holler. If I throw a brick in a group of dogs, the one that holler is the one that got hit. So Black politicians are cowards, and they don't go against the machine. So there's if the DNC has sanctioned her for another term, which they have, then it will have to be a very charismatic and very courageous upstart, you know, that to be able to unseat her. And I don't see that yet. So my prediction is that she will be, but my thought is that she shouldn't be. And she really, as bad as she did, as horrible as she is, I haven't seen her do anything to piss off the white establishment. And I think that's her strategy. I can piss off and shit on Black people as much as I want, you know, because I'm a Black woman and I'm LGBT. I'm a token on top, stacked on top of, she's a whole roll of tokens. There's a lot of tokenism embedded in her present. First Black woman, first woman, first openly LGBTQ, first A second black mayor. There's a lot of black pride and starry eyed bullshit associated with her presence in that office. And she's like, that's all I got for you niggas. It's a bunch of symbols. But she hasn't, as long as she don't piss off the corporate interests and the people on the Gold Coast, and I don't see anywhere where she's ruffled their feathers yet, I think she will get a second term. I think she will be a 2-term mayor. I don't think she's worthy to be a 1-term mayor, and I definitely think she should be unseated, but I haven't seen the groundswell needed to dislodge her. And if there is a truly progressive candidate that comes up, I'm here to work on your campaign. You know, I have grad degrees in political science and public policies and a long history of working on political campaigns. So if there is a truly progressive, I'm just checking because I ain't getting no love from Facebook. Anybody listening from Facebook? I don't think I got any questions. All the questions are coming from YouTube. Yeah, wow. Where you at, Facebook? Am I being suppressed? Okay. As long as y'all there. All right. Anyway, that's my answer. I do not like Lori Lightfoot. I didn't vote for her, and I shan't be voting for her. All right. I was scanning around, and I lost my place. Okay. I have another question. Were the ancient Egyptians imperialists? No, they were not imperialists because imperialism is tied to capitalism, and they weren't capitalist. They were expansionists, but I hate to play semantics. But what we understand imperialism to be is not what the Egyptians did. They did expand their lands and territories, but it was not strictly through conquest. If you read the philosophies and the literature and history of ancient Egypt, they actually did not really have a standing major army. The Egyptians, when they did have military conflicts, would often have to use mercenaries. So any nation that doesn't have a standing army from within cannot be an imperial power. They were expansionists. They did seek to expand their culture and expand their inventions and technologies across beyond their defined borders, but they did it more so through negotiation and partnerships and mergers. That's why Egypt was a multicultural society before that concept was ever even conceived of, and why Egypt was always so vulnerable to invasion, because they would go to people and say, hey, here's some insights, here's some resources, here's some thoughts and ideas if you want to kick it. And that's why, the Muslims, the Islamic hordes, and the Greeks, and then Egypt was always being invaded as opposed to invading other people. So no, as we understand it to be, Egypt was not an empire, or they weren't imperialist. Is the Palestinian solution? No, the Palestinians are under settler colonialism. The Palestinians are in the position that the Native Americans were in the 1600s. So Israel is a settler colony, and the only way Israel will have legitimacy if they are displaced and displace and or exterminate all Palestinians. So the ballot is not an option. They're not allowed to vote in. They're not allowed to even vote in Israeli elections. They don't have Israeli citizenship. So no, they're strictly bullet. Yeah, from Yasser Arafat and Hamas and Fatah, they don't have the ballot or the bullet option. But I do believe that if they had the ballot option, I would not tell them to abandon the bullet option, but I would definitely tell them to employ it, and I think they would too. So it's bullet right now, strictly bullet. If we were in the position that the Palestinians were in, I would say bullet only. But right now, I think as U.S. citizens, even though we are oppressed citizens, we are in the ballot and bullet phase of our struggle. Okay. Do you think? Okay, now I'm finally caught up to where I was. I'll try to answer the question, give shorter answers because the time is clicking. And I don't want Dr. Mingo to come knock on the door and shut us down. Okay, Marlena, the contradiction is crazy. Do you think he would have been effective though he had just stayed in his lane? no school fund, Big Papa, etc. Just a straight child psychologist. No, I don't think he would have been effective because he has some very strict Judeo-Christian views, and he has not resolved his Judeo-Christian views with his Pan-African agenda. He believed in he's a paternalist, a patriarchist, a homophobe. So no, I don't think. I think he, instead of expanding Pan Africanism and expanding African centered thought, I think he contaminates African centered philosophies with his own Judeo Christian Western indoctrination. I was in that same position. I was in that same position. I was an Afro-sexist or whatever, Afro-sexist, where I thought the man is the head of the household, strong black families, and all that bullshit. So even if he didn't do his school fund, even if his megalomania didn't manifest itself in creating a Dr. Umar action figure and the Big Papa, and he lied about his lineage and his relationship to the family, even without all that shit, if you just go off of his ideas, they are quite regressive. So what he is trying to do is much like all black hyper nationalists or alpha males do. They want to create a black replica of what white people have. White men are dominant. White men tell white women what to do, and they have two-parent families, and there's strict gender roles and strict roles for women, and the women have to bow to the powerful man and punks, and we're going to be, that shit is nothing but a replica of what, and that's not working for white folks. That's not even working for white folks. So no, I don't think that Dr. Umar would have been effective. Well, wait a minute. What am I saying? Dr. Umar is effective. Like when he says he's one of the most requested black scholars and all that, that's true. But the reason why Dr. Umar is effective is not because he is educating and enlightening or revolutionizing people. He's confirming their indoctrination. And what that means is Farrakhan does the same thing. Every black person is pretty much indoctrinated into the standard white way of being. We are indoctrinated into Judeo-Christian ideas. We are indoctrinated into the Protestant work ethic. We are indoctrinated into capitalism, in terms of earning, trade, wealth, ideas of wealth and achievement. So black people are indoctrinated at the same time, and those desires to have what white people have are embedded in our brain, where Dr. Amos Wilson said we're under what he called somnambulistic possession. And somnambulistic means you're sleepwalking. That's a fancy way to say sleepwalking, meaning that the African mind is not awakened in the average black person. And there is a white possession, a white mentality, a white desires, white disposition, white value system, European value system embedded in every African person. So the African within us is asleep, and the European enforced onto us is awakened. And so even if the black person wants to be African, it is a hard process. I became an atheist at 14 years old, and I was 27 to 28 before I abandoned my Judeo-Christian indoctrination, everything that I was taught by the Bible. Even though I would burn a Bible and mock Jesus Christ, all the indoctrination that was imposed on me from being baptized in the church at 12 and raised in the church from birth, it took me almost a decade to purge all that shit. So, but what people like Dr. Umar and Farrakhan do is they don't purge the European. They just drape a kente cloth over your mentality. So you can have all the values, the same disposition, the same objectives and methods that the white man has, but you can imagine yourself to be an African freedom fighter when you're just trying to establish a black version of European imperialism and patriarchy. So he was successful at that. So if he gets up and says, well, and basically if you take out Africa, everything he says, he sounds just like Trump. He sounds just like what do they call what's that guy's name? You go look at Focus on the Family, which is a right-wing evangelical organization, and you look at their agenda. You go look at these evangelical groups. You go look at these white nationalist groups that are fighting against white. You look at the Proud Boys, and you'll see that the agendas and the values and the rhetoric is identical. That's why Farrakhan can go on the Alex Jones show and be very comfortable and be amongst his homies. That's why so many so-called radical militant black men love Trump. So no, Umar is a right wing conservative, and you can't be right wing, you can't be conservative and revolutionary. You just can't. So he is a reactionary. He is a black separatist, but black separatism is a reactionary ideology. Black supremacy is a reactionary ideology. Okay, let's go. Um I'm sorry, I'm trying to scroll through the questions and they're jumping around. So forgive me if I miss your question. Um okay, here. Diallo, what do you think it will take for the African community worldwide to take your advice and boycott Nike? And if we did, what kind of power would that gain us, and how will we use it? I don't think boycotting Nike would gain us any power. I think a successful Nike boycott would definitely force the multinational corporations to readjust their approach. I think that would send a shockwave through corporate America. So, and that would be a good thing because during that time of readjustment is an opening for us. So, but I don't think power comes from boycotting things, and you don't boycott things for power. One thing we would gain is not, instead of a successful Nike boycott, would be evidence of a greater alignment, a greater unity, a greater ability to coordinate and to direct our people. So those things can lead to power. But if we simply say we're boycotting Nike to get some concession from Nike, and then Nike gives us that concession and then we go back to it, that's not a power play. That is an appeal. That is making an appeal to Nike, not an exercise of power over or against Nike. So I think it would be a good thing, but I don't like to misdefine what things are. That's like when a black man buys a gun and he thinks he's a warrior because he owns a gun. Simply having a gun doesn't make you a warrior. Simply being with your homies at the gun range shooting guns doesn't make you an army. So it looks like an army on the surface, like, hey, men with guns. Hey, that's what an army does. But you got to have discipline, agenda, infrastructure, resources, logistics. There's so much shit that goes to making a military than just a man getting a gun. And there's so much more to collective or communal power than simply being able to impose our will on one multinational corporation. Not that I'm against it. I just don't want to misdefine what it would mean. And what do I think it would take for the African community worldwide to boycott Nike? The only way black folks are going to boycott Nike, if there is some recording, it's like the R. Kelly thing. You would have to catch senior officials of Nike committing horrendous, open, blatant racial acts, and would have to be played continuously on mainstream media. That's the only thing. Simply journalists going to Myanmar or Indonesia or to Haiti to show Nike's labor practices won't do it. Them exploiting young athletes and working with these colleges to exploit young athletes, that's not going to do it. It would have to be an overt, well publicized, and continually reported atrocity that Nike had to make. Like if Nike laser printed the N-word on the soles of all of its Air Jordan shoes. It'd have to be something extreme because black people's love for Nike, and Nike, again, is a status symbol. It is a strong status symbol, and Nike has perfected marketing to the egos and the emptiness of the average black man. To see so many black men wearing Jordans. I was running a summer program with the Green Teens. I basically had a urban agriculture space, and I would hire a couple of dozen black teens from the south side of Chicago and teach them urban agriculture and urban sustainability practices. And the first couple of weeks, I would give out these vouchers for the youth to use the L train or the bus to get to and from work. And so that was only supposed to last for the first 2 weeks. And then they were supposed to use their checks that they were getting paid to work there, a pretty respectable salary for a little summer job. Anyway, the first 2 weeks, they got their checks. And then the next week, I was expecting them to get back and forth from work with the money they earned, with some of the money they earned. Anyway, a couple of the dudes were like, I have no money left. And I'm like, you got like $400-500. What do you mean you have no money left? And they were like, I bought shoes. And I'm waiting for them to go on and like, you bought shoes and what else? And that's all they bought. Like one dude spent his whole check on 2 pairs of shoes. And we were working in a filthy, muddy garden, and he wore his brand new shoes on that day. I'm like, wow. So anyway, I took them to a affluent area in Hyde Park on the University of Chicago campus. I took them over there, and I'm like, we're going to just hang out here. And I want y'all to point out how many of these affluent, wealthy white folks are wearing Jordans. And of course, that not one of them were wearing Jordans. And they were like, wow, that's something to think about. But anyway, I don't think it changed anything because 2 weeks later, I had the same damn problem. Literally, the same damn problem. So black folks' love for Nike, it's beyond me. It blows my mind. So that's what I think it would take. A horrendous, and it's not enough for Nike to just do wrong. It would require the corporate mainstream media to constantly bombard like they did with 9/11, showing those towers coming down every day. It would have to be a story that was sustained in the headlines and led on the nightly news for months, if not over a year, in order for the masses of black people to turn their back on Nike. Because the first thing Nike would do was go hire whatever poppin' ass rapper or whatever tattooed up ass athlete to do a coon dance for them. And of course they'll drive old crotchety, old half bent over Air Jordan. They drag him out. So it'd be hard. Okay. What do I think about people of color? What are your thoughts on the new classifications like by POC? What is by POC? I don't even know what that is. I've seen it. You see it. You see it. What is that even? I've seen it more than once. Black indigenous. Lord. Black indigenous people of color. Do you think white people are elevating these mixed or off-white people as buffer classes because of their numbers are diminishing? No, I don't think that's what they're doing. What they do when you say POC or by POC, what is it doing is it's asserting that white people are the standard. And then so when you're not talking about white people, because when you say people, you're talking about white people. But when you say, so if you want to specify non-white people, you have to say POC. I think it's stupid to say POC because the majority of the people on the planet, most human beings from all regions of the world, are people of color. So people of color are the standard. People of color are the standard. So the people of no color. So I think it should be P.O.N.C. And I think we should consciously start saying P.O.N.C. when we're talking about white people and just say people or humanity when we say non-white people. And it also doesn't make any sense to say POC or BIPOC is because those people are too divergent. There's really no intelligent reason to group all people of color together because you have people of color that are enemies of people of color, like the Arabs in North Africa who have slave markets, like Japan that tried to colonize and committed genocide throughout Asia. They committed genocide, the rape of Nanking. So the Japanese have been imperialist enemies. You got black women getting the hell kicked out of them in Asian nail salons and Asian hair salons, even though black women in the black community have allowed these people to come into our business and conduct business in our communities for decades. So saying people of color doesn't mean a damn thing. And indigenous people, every recognized civilized Native American tribe fully participated in the slave trade, from owning, buying, selling, and capturing runaway slaves. So there's no reason to group us together because there are never a time where all POCs, unless you're saying breathe oxygen, all POCs breathe oxygen. Unless you're saying something so there's never a time to say POC. It doesn't make sense to say it. There's really no way to apply it. There's no benefit or no loss, no liability, no agenda that involves all BOCs or all BIPOCs. So I think it is an absurd, but I think it is an affirmation of white insecurity and the level, the depth of indoctrination non-white people suffer from. So I say P.O.N.C, people of no color, and talk about white people. Don't call them white people. Call them the P.O.N.C population, the P.O.N.C community, because it's really stupid to say POC. But no, I don't think it's elevating the mix or off white people, because race missing for the white eugenicists, they think white race missing is a law. So I don't think that's the agenda for it. I think it's more of a political thing than a population or eugenics or what you call a numeric issue. The manifesto rebuked. I rebuke her too in the name of Shango. Yes, they still, yes, white people will rule. They don't rule because they're the majority. They rule because they have a monopoly on violence. Paul Mooney passed away. Any thoughts? I was a fan of Paul Mooney. I thought he's a funny ass dude. You know, I thought he was funny. But I don't really feel sad. I mean, the dude was old and he was suffering for quite some time. As I know, he had either advanced Alzheimer's or something. That's why he wasn't in the public eye. So I think it's a good thing that his suffering is over. I know he was pretty much in ill health up until the time he passed away. But I like him. I had first discovered Paul Mooney in the early '90s. He put out a comedy record called Race, and on the cover of that record, he was holding a starter pistol, and he had these white folks lined up to run. So, yeah, that was a funny record. But in his race thing, I saw that cover. I went into my local. I bought a CD back in the days before downloading. But you see, the Paul Mooney race album, he has white men in suits down in the starter position, and he's holding a starter pistol. So that was cool. That's my first Paul Mooney album that I bought. When did that come out? Um, I don't remember when he came out with that. Uh, but that's when I first, because I didn't know, I'm not that old. Like the Richard Pryor and all that shit, that came a little bit before my time. So I didn't know about him until that album came out. So I discovered him while I was in college, even though he had been around long, long before that. And I started recognizing him in a lot of movies and stuff too. So if you don't have that album, you should check it out. I don't see it around very much anymore. But you don't see any records around anymore. But uh, it's a funny album. That's one good thing. That's one good thing about it didn't come out in 2010, about Dave Chappelle. I think Dave Chappelle should be credited with reviving Paul Mooney's career. He reintroduced him to a lot of people's their first experience with Paul Mooney was. I didn't agree with everything Paul Mooney said though, you know, as far as his politics, but I really appreciated, his willingness to talk about it. And if you listen to his records, um, if you listen to his records, you will see that yeah, it came out in '93. So I've been following or a fan of Paul Mooney since 1993. But if you listen to his records, you'll often hear him talking about the white people leaving his shows. And he starts cursing. So if you're a white person and you went to a Paul Mooney show, you either had to sit through him berating you through the show, because whenever you get walked, oh, look at the white folks leaving. Nothing made him happier. I've never seen Paul Mooney live, but I've listened to several of his live performances and seen his albums. Nothing made Paul Mooney happier than white people storming out of his show. Like, oh, look at the white folks. They leaving. They leaving. I hope niggas is robbing your house when you get there. Ha ha, you can't stand it. We have to deal with your shit. We have to deal with white folks being over us. Everywhere we look, we see white. But you come to one show where black folks is being able to express ourselves and you can't stand it for 1 minute. Ha ha, you ain't getting money back for your tickets. Oh, that used to crack. So that was his highlight of his night, is to be so offensive that white folks had to storm out the show. So shout out to Paul Mooney. Rest in peace. Last question of the evening. Sorry for everyone I didn't get to. Oh, wait. Let me answer this question first. How much would you like us to send tonight on Venmo, good brother? How much money you want? Or Cash App? or you can become a Patreon. So I would like, man, it would be my dream photo if I could go and at least, can I get, $50, not each, just all together. I'd greatly appreciate it and help a brother out. Oh, okay. Oh, let me answer two more questions. I'll get back to you, Wangisi. I'm sorry, but I mean, there's a P.O.N.C in the room, so we can't, just for affirmative action, we're gonna answer one P.O.N.C question. Uh, Camphor asks, Diallo, white man here, trying to explain to to my liberal family that America is still white supremacist. What word should I use for Uncle Toms like Obama? Blacks who say that whites want to hear. Blacks who say what? Oh, blacks who say what white wants to hear. First of all, you should explain to your liberal family that it is not white supremacists because they don't feel that they're white supremacists. And white supremacy is not what they have ever been because white people are not supreme to anyone. What America is, and it's easier to explain to them, is that the United States is white dominated. And when you explain to the average white person about white domination, you first have to establish what their orientation is. So you can explain that politically, you can explain it economically, you can explain it through entertainment or the entertainment industry, politics, and society and culture. Stop saying white supremacists, stop saying white supremacy. You have to speak about white domination. There are fields and areas where white people have extracted resources and continue to unjustly dominate industries. So start using the language of white domination, and then you should find white scholars and white individuals, depending on how open they are to cogent, well laid out arguments. If you have someone that is liberal, and they're not really familiar with radical analysis, you can introduce them to people like Michael Moore. You can have them start to listen to Amy Goodman and Democracy Now. I mean, there's a plethora of that Kennedy guy, the radio show for the Kennedy. Just Google Kennedy Radio. But there are many progressive white voices. Michael Parenti, that will inform them and tell them in the white language, in a calm white manner, speaking for and behalf of white people. And another thing you have to explain to your family is they shouldn't be anti-racism, they shouldn't be anti-capitalist, they shouldn't be anti-white domination. No more supremacy talk because you're not supreme. They should be against those things, not in order to help, to save, or to bring relief to minorities or to non-white people. They should be engaged in those behaviors for the preservation and improvement of white people. Even though white people, you get really nice, you get big Walmarts and Targets and your soulless suburbs, simply demonstrate to your white relatives the depth of alienation from the opioid epidemic to suicide to simply feelings of apathy and loss and emptiness. Demonstrate to them that on average, the only white people who are enjoying this system are the sociopaths and psychopaths. But normal white folks are just as miserable. Now, y'all are miserable in big houses. Y'all miserable in nice cars. Y'all miserable with 750 credit scores, but y'all still miserable. And explain to them that the alienation that they feel, the emptiness they feel, is a direct result of dominating the world, exploiting and extirpating the resources of the third world. And if they would stop being parasitic members of humanity and become partners with the rest of humanity, they will be more fulfilled, even though they will have less. They might have to pay more for gas, and they might not be able to buy goods at Walmart and Target that are made by the exploited labor of the third world. But that's fine, because if you look at other white nations that have stopped or moved away from imperialism, they have a higher level of happiness, even though they have lower levels of wealth. So begin to explain them to not try to save and be liberal in order to help the poor, wretched minorities. Tell them to be good people to help their fucking selves. And if you have some white people that are more radical, then you can introduce them to people like Michael Parenti. You can introduce them to people like Derek Jensen, Deep Green Resistance, Earth Liberation Front, and more radical. So you need to begin to systematically radicalize your people and your community, not for the sake of helping the minorities, but for the sake of humanizing and rescuing white people. That's number one. What word you should use from Uncle Tom? I don't really jive with white folks calling someone an Uncle Tom, but I don't think you really need a word for black people. And Uncle number one, an Uncle Tom isn't a black person who says whatever whites want to hear. That's not an Uncle Tom. That's a dude trying to maintain his job. So, if you got a brother out there at Wendy's or Walmart, working class, struggling brother, and if he's telling white folks, yeah, this is the greatest job I ever had, or if you give me this job, I'll work hard. And you say, well, what are some of your weaknesses in the job interview? And then, so a lot of times black people, because white people not only have a monopoly on violence, but a monopoly on jobs and resources. So black people simply saying what white folks want to hear in order to extract what we need from white folks is not Tomming. Tomming is when you internalize the white agenda and you become a traitor to your own people. So I think as opposed to Uncle Tom, a less charged word, you could call them a traitor, because that is a political term. That is a political term. But again, that's our burden to bear. More so, focus on your community, saving your people, and humanizing your people for the sake of your people's survival. That's what I would say. Okay. Now I go back to my last question. Those were my last questions, but they weren't the last. This is Wangisi. Hello, good evening, sister. Hello, good night. Diallo, what do you think about the fight for 15 when it's not even a livable wage in a backwoods Midwest town? You think maybe the workers' revolt is brewing with all the clamoring around labor? Number one, I think the fight for 15 is irrelevant, even if it was a fight for 25 or a fight for 30. No society, in order to have a just society, a minimum wage is less important than a maximum wage. Workers should be fighting for a maximum wage. Imagine you're building a shelter. Your economy is a shelter, and you put in a floor, i.e. $15 minimum wage, but you don't put in a ceiling, i.e. a maximum wage. So when you have a shelter without a ceiling, what happens? You're still exposed to the elements. And within a short amount of time, that floor becomes warped. It becomes rotten. It becomes unable to support you. So what we should be fighting for is maximum wage. We should be fighting to extract resources. And there is a historical precedent. When the upper income tax rate was 97 to 98% in the post-depression era, the economy expanded greatly. And the working class incomes expanded as well. And working class incomes increased parallel to production, meaning that the harder you work, the more you would earn. That was the thing. While we're talking in the concept, because I don't think there should be any owners, I don't think there should be any, but this is within the capitalist labor context, which I don't fucking support none of that shit. Blow the whole shit up. Socialism. Workers, owners of the means of production. But outside of that, and talking within the limits we have here, I think that the fight for 15 is an extraordinary waste of effort. But again, I did talk about harm reduction. It will bring some level of minor temporary relief to workers, so I would not oppose it. So instead of putting down the fight for 15, I would work to enhance it, to expand it, and to further radicalize it. You think maybe a workers' revolt is brewing? I don't think a workers' revolt is brewing. I don't see any radical rhetoric. This is what they call a liberal appeal and not a radical demand. So there are no radical demands. Everything that the workers are asking for are embedded within the parameters and limitations of the system, unfortunately. But we who are revolutionaries should be always working to radicalize any spaces that we are in. When I was in the church, I was working to radicalize the church. When I was in a food cooperative, I was working to make it more radical. So if you are working within the fight for 15, you should be. Even when I was at the Occupy movement and they thought they were really, I was trying to radicalize the radicals. So we should be raising contradictions, explaining and expanding, and helping the people to see the long-term struggles. The ultimate goal should be workers owning the means of production, destroying the capitalist system and the capitalist exploitation of all labor. So we shouldn't be fighting for any type of wage. We should be fighting for ownership and control of our lives and resources and our labor, for full ownership of our labor. And not ever, it doesn't, any dollar amount you put on labor is still repressive and oppressive. So the Fight for 15, I think it is a brand at this point. And I think that the workers are beginning to make a headway in that, but it's much like integration. It's like the integration struggle. We fought like hell for integration, and we got it, and found out that it was a triple-edged sword, not even a double-edged sword. So we're suffering from our victory. You know, we're going to be winners and losers at the same time. It's the same hustle. It's like the feminist movement. Women were fighting to be CEOs and fighting to join the military and fight on the front line. They were fighting to be equal to men, and found out, damn, men are miserable. Like, goddamn, I want to be equal to a man when men are on average miserable assholes. And now you're equal to me. So that makes you a miserable assholes. And a lot of women in these girl power, girl bosses positions, they're either psychopaths like Kamala, or they're miserable. So fighting for equality, fighting for integration, fighting for some extra crumbs from the oppressor and from the system is often a waste of people's resources and waste of people's energy. But instead of going to tell people you're wasting your time, we should go try to enhance the movement, not to just tear it down. Work to radicalize the movement, not simply just critique it from the outside. I hope that answer was adequate. So much more to say about wages. But good night, everyone. Can't leave without putting on a little outro. All right. Okay. I got to put the thing on the thing. Somebody asked me about support, or what I would deem adequate support. So going across the screen right now is how you can support and help to sustain the BroDiallo broadcast, and the media apparatus that we're being Oh, he said he's sending the $50. Damn it, I should have asked for more. God damn it, I got to get my Umar on. I should have asked for that. What? Y'all gave Umar $500,000, and he said y'all the scum of the earth. He said, what did he say? Y'all trifling. Y'all gave Umar $500,000, and he went online and said, I wanted $750,000. And then when y'all started getting close to the $750,000, he told y'all he wanted $1 million. Y'all give me $50 tonight, and I tell you, I promise you, you get nothing but praise and adulation and appreciation from me. I ain't gonna call y'all trifling, even if you are. Anyway, BroDiallo broadcast. Q4, I'm about to say Q4 radio. I'm not on the radio now. The views and opinions expressed tonight are not those of Q4 radio or its affiliate stations. Anyway, this is Q&A. I like having guests here. Like, share, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Give me a shout out and a share if you're watching it on Facebook. And keep the inputs coming. I'm definitely going to consider media reviews of movies and shit like that. Beyond the book reviews. I'm not just a nerd. I'm actually pretty cool, if you could, take my word for that. And thank you for being with me tonight. And I will see you guys for the Q&A next Wednesday. Hopefully I'll have a guest. I had a couple of people agree to come on. Some real icons, some actual celebrities that are going to come on and do a Q&A with BroDiallo. But I'm not gonna spill the beans yet. But I got a tentative yes. I just got to set up the time and place. And plus, I owe them some stuff. So I'm going to fulfill my debt to them before I ask them to come on the BroDiallo broadcast. Because I don't want them to get on here and talk about me like a dog. Anyway, still rambling. Actually, I'm not used to. I can't even get off the thing. Because I'm waiting on Dr. Mingo to come in here and play her hate on us. But anyway, it doesn't look like she's coming. I hope dinner's ready. It's late as hell. Anyway, good night. Thank you. Thanks for being with you. If I didn't get to your question, I greatly apologize. And tune in next week, and hopefully, prayerfully, I'll get to your questions then. Good night. Be safe. Keep wearing a mask. Keep social distancing. Keep staying alive.